The United States dared to dream again. For the first time in almost 2 decades, we had an American male in the US Open final. But all hopes came crashing down because of one man. The man is Jannik Sinner. How did the Italian soar above the challenges he faced at the beginning of the tournament to win his second Grand Slam of the season? And what stood out about Sinner's run to the US Open Championship? The news about Sinner being cleared of any doping wrongdoing was still fresh as ever when Sinner faced Mackenzie McDonald in the first round, an opponent who he'd beaten in each of their last 3 meetings. There were doubts and question marks on how Sinner was going to respond to the negative comments on the court as he began his US Open campaign. Facing one of the home crowd favorites, Sinner struggled to find any rhythm inside Arthur Ashe. McDonald was super aggressive on Sinner's second serves as he got the early break right away. As someone who can handle pace very well, Mackenzie was comfortable during the baseline exchanges with Sinner, and he was also able to draw out errors from the Italian too. In fact, the first set was so bad that Sinner made 14 unforced errors in that set alone. But as soon as Sinner settled into the match, Mackenzie was no match for him, especially in the third and fourth sets. Sinner was holding most of his service games to love, and McDonald winning only 1 point from his service games a number of times. At this point, McDonald had slowed down as he totally got outclassed and outplayed in just under 2.5 hours. From one American to another, Sinner was up against Alex Michelsen in the second round, and by then we saw a much improved version of Sinner who was ready to remind everyone of why he's the #1 player in the world. Both players exchanged breaks midway through the first, but Sinner broke Michelsen again and consolidated on the break to take the first set 6-4. By the second set, Sinner was already taking some target practice as he picked Michelsen apart. Unlike in his first round match, Sinner was finding a lot of success at the net. And when he didn't venture forward, he was suffocating Michelsen from the baseline by going ballistic on the cross-court exchanges, and then finishing off the rally with a winner down the line. Michelsen won only 2 games after the first set, as Sinner got the job done in straights in 1 hour and 39 minutes. Now let's pause here for a moment and take a look at the stats from the first 2 rounds. Sinner wasn't making a lot of first serves, just over 50%, but he was so good at protecting his second serves, which made it easy for him to hold serve despite not being at his best in that department. By the time Sinner was up against O'Connell in the third round, the first serve percentage had jumped up to 65%, and the rest of his game was business as usual. With Alcaraz and Djokovic already out at this point, Sinner had become the favorite for the title, with only Medvedev really being his biggest threat. But back to the O'Connell match. Here's the thing. O'Connell has a one-handed backhand, which we all know is literally a suicide mission against someone like Sinner, who has one of the best backhands on tour himself. During the cross-court exchanges, Sinner peppered O'Connell's backhand with great depth, forcing him to slice the ball on the return, which Sinner happily returned with inside-out forehands. The implication? O'Connell didn't get many chances to dictate the play. It was all on Sinner's terms. Realizing that this wasn't going to cut it, O'Connell decided to come to the net more in the second set, but still got past a number of times. Sinner, on the other hand, was comfortable serving down the tee to the backhand, knowing that O'Connell was going to reply with a block return, a donation which Sinner accepted with beautiful +1s. Another thing that stood out to me in the match was something that's always been a huge plus for Sinner: his returns. Compared to other players, Sinner doesn't back up as much on the return, and more often than not defends closer to the baseline. So unless you have a really good serve and can volley quite well, you aren't going to have an easy time of it on your service game. For O'Connell, he was only able to win 58% of points on his first serve, which, let's face it, was never going to cut it against Jannik. But let's just say we all expected Sinner not to face any issues in those first 3 rounds. Though his 4th rounder against Tommy Paul, I was expecting some fireworks. You see, I've actually been pretty upbeat about Tommy. I'd recently just made a deep dive about him going into the match against Sinner because some of you were requesting it, and also I just feel like as far as the Americans go, he's just not talked about that much. The match delivered in a way, for the first 2 sets. Tommy raced out of the blocks and quickly found himself up 2 breaks, but against someone like Jannik, being up 2 breaks is no guarantee that you're going to take the set. Up 4-1, Tommy lost a crucial point to go down love 30 during his service game. Take a look at this point carefully because I'll refer back to it. That passing shot from Sinner was brilliant, but Tommy also didn't have the weight of shot behind his forehand to finish off that point, even with Sinner already in a poor position. The rolls were exchanged shortly after, and just take a look at how Sinner ripped that forehand from a similar position. The Italian would eventually get back on serve and force a tiebreak. Sinner's forehand quality was on full display again as he took the first set. The second set was a lot closer as both players held serve with relative ease and could only be separated by yet another tiebreak, which Sinner took to make it 14 wins in his last 15 tiebreaks. What? Clutch just doesn't get any better than that. To be fair though, Tommy was literally doing everything in his capacity. But yet again, Sinner's forehand superiority was the difference as the Italian stole yet another tiebreak. With the win taken out of Tommy's sails, the third set was rather straightforward as Sinner sealed the deal.
Game, second match, Sinner.
Here's what Tommy said about Sinner after the match.
He plays a super fast-paced tennis. He's unreal out of the corners. Hits a quality ball every time the ball's on his racket. Sinner's probably the best ball striker on tour.
Honestly, Paul losing that match in straight sets simply confirmed that there were no lingering doubts about Sinner's form, fitness, or tactics. The stage was now set for the final before the final. Medvedev had reached the final of the US Open 3 times in 5 years and won the tournament in 2021. He won his first 6 meetings against Sinner and then lost the next 5 in what's evolved to become a pretty dynamic matchup. Medvedev was also the man who stopped Sinner at Wimbledon, so we knew this match was going to be special. Both players weren't getting a lot of first serves in, so it came down to the return. Sinner countered Medvedev's deep return position with clinical volleys and drop shots. And when Medvedev did decide to hug the baseline, Sinner beat Medvedev at his own game with some insane firepower. Just to add a little context, let's compare Sinner and Medvedev's baseline battle to 2 heavyweights. Both can take a punch, but one just has more firepower. Sinner is that man. He was the more creative man on the neutral baseline rallies, short angles, down the line redirection, literally everything. As a result, he managed to draw out some errors from Medi. Medvedev made 57 unforced errors compared to Sinner's 38, which was pretty poor for someone who doesn't usually miss much. Apart from the wild swing in momentum in the second set, Sinner had Medvedev in a straitjacket for most of the match. Both players treated us to insane points like this. But ultimately, you get the feeling that if Medvedev doesn't improve his offensive game, especially early in the rallies, he'll actually have a hard time winning another slam. And by improving his offensive game, I mean what can he do behind his serve, which he also needs to improve, by the way. I touched on all of this in the Medvedev deep dive video I did a couple weeks ago. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it already. It's not like he played badly, but Daniil definitely needs more creativity during neutral baseline rallies, especially against players like Sinner and Alcaraz, so that his game doesn't become so predictable. Anyways, Sinner got the job done in 4 sets to become only the 4th active player to reach the semifinals at all 4 majors. Sinner was up against his good friend Jack Draper in the semis. It was Draper's first semifinal appearance at a Grand Slam, and he'd gotten there without dropping a single set. We expected that Draper's great lefty serve and heavy topspin forehand would cause some problems for Sinner. And to be fair, they did at times. But it was Draper's physical struggles that overshadowed the entire match. The first set was cagey, with both players not exactly at their very best. Draper was tentative coming forward, and in fact, he only did so 6 times. But after losing the set 7-5, he knew he couldn't continue to trade baseline shots with Sinner, so he more than tripled his net approaches to a total of 19 times in the second set alone. And guess what? It paid off. But Draper was also now struggling physically. He was sweating like crazy and also vomiting, which ultimately led to some dehydration and fatigue. If only he had some SuckerPunch. Sinner, on the other hand, continued to go full nuclear from the baseline and was coming out on top in more of the rallies. The best of the bunch, this crazy point right here. Sinner hurt his wrist after falling, and with Draper now running on fumes, both players needed the medical trainer. But it was Sinner who raised his level in the tiebreak to go up 2-0 before finishing off Draper in the third. I thought Draper showed a lot of heart, and he should definitely be proud of his US Open campaign. Plus, he's now inside the top 20 for the first time in his career. Being the classy guy that he is, Draper didn't dwell on his physical struggles too much. Instead, he gave Sinner credit.
Jannik beat me fair and square. He was too strong for me today.
Draper also mentioned that he didn't have any issues before the match, but the intensity from Sinner coupled with some nerves made him feel literally sick on the court. A little off topic though. What do you think about Draper's oversized kit and how he struggles with tugging his shirt on his serve routine? Anyway, let's get into the final analysis. Taylor Fritz had just played one of his best matches all year, coming out on top in a 5-set thriller against Tiafoe in the semis. And history was on the line for both players. As a top player and the best of the Americans, Fritz was always going to have a fighting chance against Sinner.
I'm going to give everything I possibly have, and I know that for a fact. I'm going to give it everything I can possibly give it.
But for that to happen, he needed to serve extremely well. And that didn't quite happen. Fritz only made 38% of his first serves in the first set and won just 6 points on his serve the entire set. Big problem. Not making first serves also meant that Fritz gave Sinner the opportunity to attack his second serve and drag him into rallies that were sometimes more than 16 shots. That didn't work for Taylor because although he's a natural ball striker and is great off both wings, his movement is nowhere close to Sinner's. That was always going to be a problem on the defense and also on offense too. Sinner got the early break, but Fritz got back on serve after this missed drive volley from Sinner.
Wow.
With neither of the players venturing forward much, the heavyweight exchanges from the baseline continued. I was more than impressed with the pop I saw on Fritz's forehand. He was ripping those balls. Now, his forehand has gotten a lot better, and he was able to use it to hurt Sinner. But at the same time, it also led to a number of errors, which is also understandable. Most of those errors were hit on the stretch, and that's really the one big difference between Sinner and Fritz. Sinner has the ability to hit insanely powerful shots at the end range, but Fritz isn't quite there himself, as we can see here. Sinner then went on to break Fritz 2 more times to take the first set 6-3. Fritz did improve his serve quality drastically in the second set, from 38% to 78%, and this time he lost only 3 points on his first serve during the set. But that was only one part of the puzzle. The second part was to try and find a way to attack Sinner's serve off the return. Sinner did a great job mixing up the serve, going to the body backhand, out wide, and down the tee to the forehand. Fritz wasn't able to create a single break point throughout the entire set. Meanwhile, Sinner made his move for the kill, with Fritz serving to stay in the set at 4-5. Sinner backed up, adjusting his return position to attack Fritz's serve and take full big cuts at the ball. Shades of Medvedev, maybe? 3 of the points won in that game were directly owed to Sinner's superiority on the backhand cross-court exchanges. The Italian then wrapped up the set with this incredible backhand down the line to take the set 6-4. The third set came and Sinner picked up right where he left off. Now, the crazy thing is that he was making only 40% of his first serves, but when they managed to go in, Sinner won all 14 points. But for Fritz, he'd now thrown caution to the wind and was prepared for an all-out attack. With an adjusted mindset, he subsequently produced his best set of the match. Now putting Sinner on the defensive, the Italian still saved all 3 break points he faced in the opening game. However, Fritz continued to push the envelope. An inspired Fritz, who was now coming to the net a lot more, eventually got the break and was now playing to the crowd more than ever. He had the chance to serve for the set and was 2 points away from forcing a 4th set, but it was Sinner who raised his level in the clutch moments and punished Fritz for being just a little tentative on the forehand. Now serving to stay in the set at 5-6, the nerves crept up on Fritz. He wasn't making first serves, and when he managed to do so, poor decision making gave Sinner 2 championship points. and Sinner eventually converted to become US Open champion for the first time in his career. So what were the biggest takeaways from the final? Sinner forced Fritz to play outside his comfort zone, which led to more errors from Fritz because although he has the ability to match Sinner's power from the baseline, his average movement puts him at a bit of a disadvantage. I also noticed that Sinner was using a number of inside-in forehands, forcing Fritz into hitting more running forehands, knowing that Taylor was going to put more loop on the ball just because he doesn't have the same ability to accelerate on shots at end range like Jannik. We saw this a number of times throughout the match. I also felt that Fritz could have worked more with sharper angles instead of trying to play down the middle through the court against Sinner. In addition to that, Fritz might have been feeling the after effect of the 5-setter against Big Foe, and even if it wasn't going to have any impact on the overall outcome of the match, we could have been in for a 4-setter at least. Fritz got a couple of tactics right, but the execution wasn't what he would have liked. For instance, he's not the best serve and volleyer. It wouldn't have been realistic to expect him to do that all the time, especially knowing that Sinner would rip the ball and not slice much on defense. That would only mean forcing Taylor to be even more precise with his net game and volleys, even though it's a relative weakness for him overall. He doesn't have quick hands, so I'm not sure how that would have worked out. But credit to Fritz for his hard work. In my opinion, he's one of the hardest workers on tour, and as long as he continues down this path, he'll have many more chances in the future. For Sinner, he took down 4 Americans en route to the title. He didn't have the best serve in the final, but he did more than enough to take care of business. It still amazes me to see how powerful he is from the defensive positions and all the things he does on court. But the man is not satisfied just yet. Here's a snippet of what he said after the match.
Not everything was perfect, I could have served a little slightly better, but this makes me realize that, the work never stops. If you want to be a better player, you always have to work.
Let's now take a look at some of the numbers behind Sinner's title run. Sinner is the first Italian man in history to win the US Open. It's now 7 hardcourt titles in the last 52 weeks for Sinner. Sinner is also the youngest man to win both hardcourt majors in a single season, only after Mats Wilander, Federer, and Novak. Sinner is 59-6 on hard courts in the last 52 weeks. That's a 90.8% win rate. Only Alcaraz and Rublev beat Sinner on hard courts this year. Jannik is also the first man to win his first 2 Grand Slam titles in the same season or calendar year since Guillermo Vilas all the way back in 1977. Other players like Alcaraz and Murray won their second Grand Slam titles less than a year after their first, but it wasn't in the same calendar year. Sinner now stands alone at the top with over 4,000 points separating him and second place Zverev in the rankings. And these are my thoughts on the men's tour moving forward. We are officially in the Big Two era, and it doesn't mean that Djokovic won't win another Grand Slam. He still has a winning head-to-head record against every player in the top 20. But just looking at Sinner and Alcaraz sharing the spoils 2-2 this season in the Grand Slams, and also winning a couple of Masters 1000 titles among themselves, it's crystal clear beyond a doubt that they're the top dogs on tour. Unfortunately, I think the wait for an American champion will continue for a while as long as Sinner and Alcaraz are healthy. I know we're all eager to see an American man snag a slam, but with Sinner and Alcaraz standing in the way, Novak not done yet, and Medvedev still a big threat, it's going to be hard. Hard, but not impossible. Unfortunately for Sinner, the controversies surrounding his doping incident are still being talked about and how it affects his US Open title win and his legacy overall. Personally, I've been super impressed with how Sinner has handled the pressure of the situation. It can't be easy. But over to you guys. What do you make of Sinner, his title win, his hardcourt dominance this season, and all the other X's and O's? Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out the What's the Dill section in our Discord community, where I'll be taking your questions and featuring them in the upcoming deep dives. Next up is Naomi Osaka. With the help of SuckerPunch, we've revamped our newsletter, and I'm super excited to be bringing you my hot takes and opinions over there. If you haven't subscribed, definitely do so. You don't want to miss out. We also have some great content coming your way this week, talking about Aryna Sabalenka and the US Open overall, plus a special tennis challenge that I did on court. I can't wait to share it with all of you. Until next time, keep swinging.